On June 24, 2023, in Columbia County, a peaceful summer evening seemed to be passing by without anything unusual. The quiet residential streets were lit only by solitary streetlights, and the chirping of crickets filled the cool air. But that tranquility was shattered when a car, speeding at 57 miles per hour, suddenly raced past, clearly violating the area's 35 miles per hour speed limit. The car sped along as though it were participating in a race, the roar of the engine breaking the stillness of the evening. The tires screeched rapidly on the pavement, creating a hazy streak of light from the headlights that looked almost like the car was searching for freedom in a still world. But what caught the officer's attention wasn't just the blinding speed, but the strange absence of light from the front of the car. The left headlight was completely dark, not emitting a single beam. A simple irregularity, but enough to raise suspicion. In the blink of an eye, the sharp sound of sirens pierced the quiet, waking the space from its stillness. The flashing lights, bright and urgent, acted like symbols of power, lighting up the dark air around the car. The transition from calm to chaos had officially begun, and all that remained was the anticipation and tension of an unpredictable event. The officer approached the car, slowly drawing nearer to the face of the 29-year-old woman sitting silently behind the wheel. She flinched slightly as the patrol car's headlights illuminated her, her eyes flashing with a hint of anxiety, as if she realized she had done something wrong. As she rolled down the window, a wave of strong beer scent rushed into the air, filling the confined space of the car with a heavy atmosphere. The smell of beer wasn't just on her breath. It seemed to have seeped into every corner of the small space, an unmistakable trace that couldn't be hidden. The light from the patrol car shone on her face, and the officer immediately noticed her bloodshot eyes, half closed like someone just waking up from a long sleep. Her gaze was unfocused, hazy, a picture of exhaustion. She resembled someone who had just undergone an emotional shock, perhaps akin to a scene from a dramatic Korean drama, making everything around her seem distant and out of focus. Then, her words began to spill out, but they got stuck, as though she could no longer control the machinery of her speech. Every word she uttered was slurred, disconnected, as though she had forgotten how to use language properly. It was as if, in that moment, she had lost the ability to communicate normally, leaving the officer in front of her with an image that was both strange and unintelligible. Not long after, she hurriedly offered justifications, her voice almost as if searching for some kind of miracle that could ease the tense situation, yet it couldn't conceal the unease in her every syllable. "I only had one beer. It was early, around 5 or 6 o'clock, and my car was having problems. Everything broke down," she said quickly, almost breathlessly, as if these words could somehow save her from the mounting trouble. Her words now carried a pleading tone, as though she was hoping for some sympathy or understanding from the officer. Her eyes were wide with confusion, as if all she could do in that moment was pour out every excuse, hoping that someone would believe her story. But in contrast to her hasty words, her worrying couldn't be hidden in her bloodshot eyes and disoriented expression. The officer, his face still stern and unyielding, showed no sign of wavering, no sign of change or sympathy, quietly listening. He didn't seem surprised. These were just the same excuses he had heard countless times throughout his career. When he spoke, his voice was devoid of any sentiment but remained professional. "Yes, and you were also going 57 miles per hour in a 35 miles per hour zone." His words were simple, unadorned, yet forceful, an undeniable statement of facts. No matter how much she tried to justify herself, the truth could not be denied. His tone was cool, yet not rude, a reminder that justice and regulations were unaffected by hasty words or unreasonable explanations. His words rang out like a bell, forcing the woman to confront the undeniable reality, whether she wanted to continue fleeing from her responsibilities or not. After a series of tense sobriety tests, from waddling like a penguin to focusing on the officer's finger, this woman still tried to maintain an oddly persistent confidence. Each step she took, each attempt to balance on her high heels, seemed only to increase her misery, but she kept forcing a smile, as though she were participating in a strange game. The anxiety swelled inside her, but she couldn't show it. Despite her trembling legs and shallow breath, she confidently asserted, "I'm really not good at these exercises. But I'm sure I only had one drink." Her voice rang out, as if trying to convince not only the officer, but herself that everything would be fine. A small beer couldn't possibly affect her ability to drive, or so she thought. Despite her sweaty palms and growing nervousness, she couldn't give up the belief that she would make it through this situation. However, when the breathalyzer test results came through, everything suddenly changed, undeniable and clear. The screen lit up, and the number 0.11 appeared, like an indictment revealing an irrefutable truth. This number far exceeded the allowed limit of 0.08, and for her, it was a heavy blow to her steadfast confidence. She stood frozen, her eyes staring at the number, as if hoping the machine would change its result right away. Seconds passed in tense silence, a flicker of distraction, a moment of doubt, and she took a deep breath. Her voice began to tremble slightly, a trace of panic creeping in, when she spoke. "How can this be? Is the machine malfunctioning? It must be because I'm small ... I only had a light beer." She forced a laugh, half joking, half trying to convince herself that this result couldn't possibly be correct. Though her words sounded like a naive excuse, they reflected the fear she couldn't conceal. How could one small beer cause her to exceed the limit? She told herself it was just an unfortunate accident, and as always, she hoped for a miracle to solve the problem. But at that moment, in the heavy silence, she realized that reality couldn't be easily changed, no matter how much she believed otherwise. After being brought to the station, she didn't stop showcasing her acting skills, turning every moment into part of a one-of-a-kind performance. She started with dramatic screams, as if enduring the ultimate pain of humanity. Her cries echoed down the hallway, drawing the attention of everyone nearby. But the interesting part was, amidst the chaos of sounds, she didn't forget to slip in sharp insults. "You guys must all have C grades." These jabs were filled with humor, yet had a mocking edge to them, as if she were standing on stage, declaring herself the star of the show. But she didn't stop there. She played the fainting game as a way to escape the pressures of the moment. Her body swayed, her eyes shut tightly, but everyone in the room could see through the facade. It was clearly an act. However, as soon as she felt that her charade wasn't capturing enough attention, she immediately stood up and began delivering a deep philosophy. "I don't trust anyone. You guys are all assholes." This wasn't just a display of frustration. It was a declaration of war against the world she felt had treated her unfairly. When the police tactfully reminded her to comply with the procedure, she continued her act with absolute confidence. "I'm a free person. I have the right ... not to cooperate." Her response was arrogant and bold, as if she were a revolutionary standing up against an oppressive regime. These words not only reflected her ignorance of her rights, but also highlighted her unquenchable arrogance. Perhaps, in that moment, she truly believed she was part of a grand struggle, where she was the protagonist and everyone around her was the villain. At the police station, she was more than just a lawbreaker. She was an artist, a philosopher, and a rebel, all in one body. Every action, every word she spoke was part of a dramatic performance, leaving those witnessing it in disbelief, even laughing at the absurdity and chaos of the situation. For months later, and the story didn't end as anyone might have hoped. On the day the court handed down the verdict, all she got was a settlement that seemed to satisfy no one, though at least the law had the final say. She pleaded guilty to resisting an officer, but the more serious charges, including driving while intoxicated, were dropped. The result of a long and turbulent process was a sentence of 5 days in jail, 12 months of probation, and a series of traffic violations that she couldn't be proud of. But there was one thing no one expected. After the trial ended, she still couldn't believe the injustice in her eyes. "I only had one beer. They're blowing everything out of proportion." That was her declaration as she left the courtroom. Just one beer, and everything changed. What she saw was just a huge misunderstanding, overreaction by law enforcement. But would anyone truly believe this story? And so, from a seemingly simple incident, just a small mistake that could have been forgiven, the story turned into a tragicomedy with all the emotional highs and lows, from peaceful and harmless to chaotic and out of control. A slip-up on the dark path of alcohol had set everything spinning. And in the end, it ended just as strangely, back to calm, but now filled with the smell of beer, tears, and an indelible shame. The whole story, with everything that could have happened, was now just a sad joke that everyone could see, but no one could laugh at. Her case, although concluded with clear sentences and punishments, carried a lesson that was hard to overlook. Sometimes, actions that seem harmless, just small mistakes, can lead to unforeseen consequences. One beer, One impulsive decision, and everything changes. This wasn't just about a traffic violation or drunk driving. It was a warning about losing control, self-restraint, and how we face stressful situations in life. In today's society, where every action can be judged through a legal or societal lens, staying calm and thinking carefully before each decision is incredibly important. Life may put us in unexpected and sometimes absurd situations, but our actions will always determine the final outcome. And in this case, the lesson is clear. Don't let one thoughtless moment cloud your entire future. Ultimately, the price to pay for hasty decisions isn't just legal punishment, but the loss of reputation and self-respect. This story is not just a tragedy, it's a lesson in managing oneself in difficult situations and being aware of our actions at every step.